The fence post snapped clean through. Caleb heard it from the barn, a sharp crack that didn't belong to wind or weather. He set down the bridle he'd been mending and stepped into the late afternoon light, squinting toward the north pasture where his small herd grazed. The sun hung low and orange, casting long shadows across the valley floor. Another crack, then another. He moved faster now, boots crunching through dry grass, hand instinctively brushing the revolver at his hip. Fence posts didn't break themselves, not 3 in a row. When he crested the low rise, he stopped dead. A figure crouched near the fence line, working frantically with a pry bar. Small, lean, dressed in men's clothes too large for the frame, brown trousers rolled at the ankles, a worn shirt hanging loose. A battered hat covered most of the face, but strands of dark hair escaped at the edges. The figure wedged the bar under another post and heaved. Wood groaned, splintered, gave way. Caleb's cattle shifted nervously, sensing the breach. Another few minutes and they'd wander through, scatter across open range where rustlers worked in pairs and asked no questions. He drew his revolver, thumb resting on the hammer, didn't cock it, not yet. Step away from the fence. The figure froze, didn't turn, didn't drop the pry bar. I said step back. Slowly the intruder straightened, turned, the hat brim lifted. Not a man. A young woman stared back at him, dirt smudged across one cheek, eyes wide but not with fear. Defiance burned there, mixed with something sharper. Desperation, maybe, her jaw set tight, lips pressed into a thin line. She couldn't have been more than 22, 23, thin in a way that spoke of missed meals, not choice. Her hands, wrapped around that pry bar, were scraped raw, nails broken and dirty. Caleb kept the gun steady. You're tearing down my fence. I know what I'm doing. Her voice came rough, like she hadn't used it much lately, or maybe like she'd screamed herself hoarse and had nothing left but gravel. That much is clear, he gestured with the revolver, dropped the bar. She hesitated, her knuckles went white around the iron. Drop it, or I'll assume you plan to use it on me. The bar hit the ground with a dull thud. She didn't raise her hands, didn't beg, just stood there, chin lifted, waiting for whatever came next. Caleb studied her, the too big clothes, the worn boots held together with twine, the way her eyes kept darting past him toward the road, like she expected someone else to arrive any moment. You working for someone? He asked. Rustlers pay you to open the fence, scatter my herd. No. Then why? She said nothing. He stepped closer. She didn't back away. Up close, he could see the exhaustion carved into her face, shadows under her eyes, hollows in her cheeks. A fading bruise yellowed along her jawline. She smelled like dust and sweat and fear buried so deep it had become part of her. I'll ask once more, Caleb said quietly. Why are you tearing down my fence? Her throat worked. When she finally spoke, the words came barely above a whisper. Because if your cattle scatter, you'll be occupied. You'll ride out looking for them. You won't notice me taking one of your horses. The honesty of it hit him like a fist. You're stealing a horse. I was going to. Past tense. You caught me, she met his eyes. So shoot me or turn me in. Either way, I'm done. Caleb lowered the revolver, didn't holster it. Done with what? Running. The word hung between them. She didn't elaborate, didn't need to. He'd seen enough people running in his 34 years to recognize the look, the way they carried themselves like they expected the ground to open up and swallow them whole, the way they flinched at sounds that weren't there. He glanced past her at the broken fence posts, 3 clean breaks. She'd worked methodically, efficiently, no wasted effort. How long you been planning this? 3 days, watching your routine. You checked the north pasture every evening before supper. I figured I had 20 minutes, maybe 30, before you'd notice the cattle drifting. Smart. Not smart enough. A dry wind kicked up, rattling through the sagebrush. His cattle lowed softly, still nervous. Caleb studied the young woman in front of him, this desperate, dirt-smudged thief who just confessed her entire plan like she had nothing left to lose. Maybe she didn't. What's your name? She blinked, hadn't expected the question. Does it matter? Might. A long pause, then, Annie. Annie what? Just Annie. He nodded slowly, holstered the gun. Her eyes widened slightly, surprise, suspicion, confusion all flickering across her face in rapid succession. You're not arresting me. Didn't say that. Caleb bent and picked up the pry bar, tested its weight. Good iron, old but solid. You know how to use tools. What? Tools, hammer, saw, nails. You know how to mend a fence instead of tearing one down. Annie stared at him, like he'd started speaking a foreign language. Yes, some. Some's a start. He gestured toward the broken posts. You're going to fix what you broke, all 3 posts, properly, then we'll talk about the rest. The rest? Why you're running, who you're running from, and whether there's a better way forward than horse theft and hoping you make it to the next county before someone puts a bullet in you. Her defiance cracked, just barely, just enough for him to see the exhaustion beneath it, the bone-deep weariness of someone who'd been holding themselves together with spit and determination and nothing else. I don't need charity, she said. Good, I'm not offering it, I'm offering work. You fix my fence, I'll feed you, after that we'll see. Why? It was his turn to pause. Why indeed? He could have dragged her into town, turned her over to Sheriff Mackey, let the law handle it. Clean and simple, but something about the way she stood there, broken and defiant all at once, reminded him of someone else, a long time ago. Because everyone deserves a chance to stop running, he said finally, even thieves. Annie's jaw tightened. She looked at the broken fence, then back at him, calculating, weighing options that probably all looked bad from where she stood. Finally, she nodded, once sharp. I'll fix your fence. Good, barn's that way, tools are inside, get to work before the light fails. He turned and started back toward the house, half expecting her to bolt, run for the tree line, disappear into the coming dusk. But when he glanced back, she was already kneeling by the first broken post, examining the damage with a focus that spoke of someone who knew how to survive by making herself useful. Caleb exhaled slowly. What the hell had he just done? Inside the house, he set coffee to boil and watched through the kitchen window as Annie worked. She moved efficiently, no wasted motion. Pulled the broken post free, dug out the base, measured twice before cutting a replacement from the stack of lumber he kept behind the barn. By the time full dark settled over the valley, she'd finished 2 posts and started on the 3rd. He brought her coffee and cornbread. She accepted both without looking at him, hands still gripping the hammer. Eat, he said, work'll wait till morning. I can finish tonight. You can also collapse from exhaustion, eat. She ate mechanically, like it was fuel, not food. When she finished, she went back to work. Stubborn. He left her to it. By the time he checked again an hour later, all 3 posts stood straight and solid, wire stretched tight between them. Annie sat slumped against the fence, eyes closed, chest rising and falling with the deep rhythm of someone who'd finally stopped moving. Caleb stood there for a long moment, studying her in the moonlight. Then he went back to the house, grabbed a blanket, and draped it over her shoulders without waking her. Tomorrow they'd talk, tonight she could rest. Whatever she was running from could wait until dawn. Morning came cold and gray. Caleb woke to find Annie already awake, the blanket folded neatly on the porch step. She stood by the water pump, washing her face and hands with the methodical precision of someone used to making do with little. He started breakfast, bacon, eggs, biscuits, more than he usually made for himself. When he called her in, she hesitated at the doorway like she expected a trap. Sit, he said, not unkindly. She sat, ate slowly this time, like she was trying to remember how food was supposed to taste. He poured coffee, strong and black, and slid a cup across the table. You did good work on the fence. Annie nodded, but said nothing. Where'd you learn? A pause, my father, before. Before what? Her hands tightened around the cup. Before he died. Caleb waited. Silence had a way of drawing truth out better than questions. He had a small ranch, she continued, voice flat. 20 miles north of here, near Benton Creek. We ran cattle, mended fence, broke horses. It was enough. Then the war ended and men came back angry, looking for someone to blame. For losing. For everything, she stared into her coffee. They said my father sold supplies to Union troops passing through, called him a traitor to the South, even though we were barely in Confederate territory and he'd only sold them food because they'd have taken it anyway. They burned our ranch, killed my father, killed my 2 younger brothers when they tried to fight back. The words came mechanical now, rehearsed, like she'd told this story to herself so many times it had lost its edges. I hid, she said, in the root cellar, heard everything, did nothing. When it was quiet, I came out. Everything was ash and bodies. Caleb's chest tightened. He knew those stories. They'd spread like poison through the territories after the war, vigilante justice, old grudges dressed up as patriotism, violence that had nothing to do with causes and everything to do with excuses. When, he asked quietly. 8 years ago, 1868. You were what, 14, 15? 15. And you've been running since. Annie's laugh came bitter. Not at first. At first I tried to rebuild, stupid, a 15-year-old girl alone on a burned ranch. The men came back, different men but the same kind. They said the land was forfeit, said my father's crimes meant we had no legal claim. Sheriff agreed. I had a week to leave. So you left. So I ran, been running ever since, working where I could, sleeping where I could, staying ahead of, she trailed off. Ahead of what? Trouble, men, the past. She looked up at him finally, and her eyes were hard. Is that what you wanted to hear? My sob story? Does it make you feel better about showing mercy to a horse thief? Caleb didn't flinch. No, but it makes me understand why you were desperate enough to try. Understanding doesn't change anything. Maybe not, he stood, poured more coffee, but it might change what happens next. Which is what? You let me go, turn me in, keep me here as, what, charity labor? I told you I don't do charity, he set the pot down, but I do need help. Ranch this size, one man can only do so much. You know fence work, you said you can break horses, can you cook? Some. Can you shoot? Yes. Ride. Better than I can walk. Then I'm offering you a job. Room, board, fair wages. You work, I pay, simple as that. Annie stared at him. Why? Why what? Why help me? You don't know me. I tried to steal from you, and you're just offering me work like it's normal. Caleb sat back down. This was the part he hadn't wanted to reach. The part he'd been avoiding since he first saw her face in the fading light yesterday. Because I know your father, he said quietly. The color drained from Annie's face. What? Thomas Farrow, that was your father's name, wasn't it? She went utterly still. How do you? I met him once, 10 years ago, spring of 1866. I was 24, fresh back from the war, working as a drover pushing cattle north. We passed through Benton Creek. Your father gave us water, let us graze our herd on his land for 2 days while we rested. Didn't charge us a cent, just said, war's over, time we started acting like neighbors again. Annie's hands trembled. I don't remember you. No reason you would. You were 12, maybe 13. Barely looked at the drovers, but I remember your father. Kind man, decent man, the kind the war should have left alone. But it didn't, she whispered. No, it didn't. Caleb leaned forward. 2 years later, I heard about the burning, heard about Thomas Farrow and his boys. I was working a ranch near Silver Creek then. By the time word reached me, it was old news, just another tragedy in a territory full of them. I didn't know there was a daughter, didn't know anyone survived. Annie's eyes glistened, but no tears fell. I survived. You did. And what, you feel guilty? Is that it? You heard about my family and did nothing, and now you want to absolve yourself by helping me. The accusations strung, because it was partly true. Maybe, Caleb admitted, but maybe I'm also tired of living in a place where good people get burned out and no one lifts a finger to stop it. Your father showed me kindness when he didn't have to. I'm trying to return the favor, even if it's 8 years too late. Annie pushed back from the table, chair scraping loud against the floor. She stood there, chest heaving, hands clenched into fists. You think one job offer fixes it? You think that balances the scales? No, nothing balances those scales. Then why? Because it's what I can do. He met her eyes. I can't bring them back, can't undo what happened, but I can give you a place to stop running if you want it. The silence stretched between them, heavy, fraught, full of things neither of them knew how to say. Finally, Annie spoke, voice raw. I don't forgive easy. I'm not asking for forgiveness. And I don't trust easy either. Fair enough. But I'll work, I'll earn my keep, and if you cross me I'll leave, no warning, no explanation, I'll just go. Understood. She studied him for a long moment, searching for the lie, the catch, the hidden angle. When she didn't find it, something in her posture shifted, not softening exactly, but unclenching, just slightly. All right, she said, I'll stay for now. Caleb nodded, for now's good enough. He stood and extended his hand. Annie looked at it like it might bite her. Then slowly she reached out and shook it. Her grip was firm, calloused, steady. One more thing, Caleb said. Those men who burned your father's ranch, you know their names. Annie's expression went cold, every single one. They still around. 2 of them are, the others scattered or died. But the leader, Cole Hendricks, he's still in Benton Creek, runs the land office now, legal and respectable. Caleb recognized the name, Hendricks, a man who'd made himself rich buying up forfeit land after the war, claiming legal authority while backed by guns and fear. He know you're alive. I don't think so, I've stayed far away. Good, keep it that way. He released her hand. We're 20 miles from Benton Creek here, should be far enough. You lay low, work quiet, we'll be fine. Annie nodded, but her eyes said she didn't believe in fine anymore, didn't believe in safe. She'd believe in fences and wages and the work in front of her, but not in permanence. That was all right. Caleb wasn't asking her to believe, just to stay long enough to catch her breath. Outside, the sun finally broke through the gray. Light spilled across the valley, turning the grass gold. For the first time in 8 years, Annie Farrow stopped running. At least for today. 3 weeks passed, like water finding its level. Annie worked dawn to dusk, mending fence, mucking stalls, breaking a young mare that had been too wild for Caleb to handle alone. She spoke little, ate efficiently, and slept in the small room off the barn that Caleb had cleared out and furnished with a cot, a lamp, and a blanket. She didn't smile, didn't relax, but she stopped flinching when Caleb moved too quickly, and she started meeting his eyes when they spoke. Progress. He paid her weekly $10, fair wages for ranch work. She took the money without comment and tucked it into a tin box she kept hidden under her cot. Escape money, Caleb figured. He didn't mention it. By the 4th week, they'd settled into an easy rhythm. Caleb handled the cattle and horses. Annie managed everything else. The ranch ran smoother than it had in years. Then one afternoon, riders came up the valley road. Caleb saw them first, 3 men on horseback, moving at an easy trot. Not hurrying, but not casual either, purposeful. Annie was at the corral, working with the mare. When she heard the hoofbeats, she went still. Her hand drifted toward the rifle leaning against the fence post. Easy, Caleb murmured. He stepped out of the barn, wiping his hands on his trousers. Let me handle it. The riders pulled up 20 feet from the house. The man in front was broad-shouldered, 50-some years old, with a thick gray beard and cold blue eyes. He wore a long coat despite the heat, and a silver badge glinted on his vest. Sheriff Mackey from Benton Creek. The 2 men flanking him were younger, harder, hired guns wearing deputy stars that meant nothing. Caleb, Mackie said, voice cordial but not warm. Been a while. Sheriff, you're looking well. Ranch is prospering, I see. Getting by. Mackie's gaze drifted past Caleb toward the corral, toward Annie. She'd moved back into the shadows, but not far enough. The sheriff's eyes lingered. You got yourself a hand, Mackie observed. I do. Young female. Good worker. I'm sure. Mackie shifted in his saddle. Mind if we step down? Got a matter to discuss. Caleb didn't move. We can discuss it from there. The sheriff smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Now, Caleb, that's not very neighborly. Neighborly went out the window when you rode up with guns instead of manners. One of the deputies bristled, hand dropping toward his holster. Mackie raised a hand, still smiling. Just a precaution. Lot of trouble in the territory lately. Can't be too careful. Trouble like what? Theft, vagrancy, people moving through who don't belong. His gaze slid back to Annie. People running from things they ought to answer for. Caleb's jaw tightened. Get to the point, Mackie. The sheriff leaned forward in his saddle. Cole Hendricks is looking for someone. A girl, 20-some years old, dark hair thin, goes by Annie Farrow, might be using a different name. You seen anyone matching that description? The words dropped like stones into still water. Caleb kept his face neutral. This is open country, lots of people pass through. Not many stop and work. Like I said, good help's hard to find. Mackie's smile vanished. Hendricks says the girl's father owed a debt before he died, says the debt passes to her, legal and binding. He's got paperwork. Paperwork for what? Land, money, things that belong to him now. The sheriff's voice hardened. He's within his rights to collect, and I'm within mine to help him do it. By dragging a young woman back to Benton Creek on a made-up debt. It's not made up if the law says it's real. The law, Caleb said slowly, or you and Hendricks. The two deputies shifted, hands now openly resting on their guns. Mackie held up a hand again, but his expression had gone cold. You want to be careful, Caleb. Cole Hendricks is an important man. Legitimate business, connections in the territorial government. You don't want to make an enemy of him. Don't I? No, you don't, Mackie straightened. I'm going to ask you one more time. You got a girl working here matching Annie Farrow's description. Caleb met his eyes. I got a ranch hand named Annie, no last name given, she does her work, causes no trouble, that's all I know. Then you won't mind if we talk to her. I do mind. That's not how this works. On my land, it does. The tension coiled tight. The deputies' hands hovered over their guns. Annie still stood in the shadows by the corral, perfectly still. Mackie studied Caleb for a long moment. Then he smiled again, thin and cold. You're a good man, Caleb, always have been, but you're putting yourself in a bad position here. Harboring a debtor is obstruction. I could arrest you both right now. You could try. One man against three. I'm not alone. At that moment, another figure emerged from the barn. Old Garrett, Caleb's nearest neighbor, a grizzled rancher in his 60s who'd ridden over that morning to help with a fence line. He carried a shotgun casually, not aimed, but present. Heard voices, Garrett said mildly, thought I'd see what's what. Mackie's smile tightened. This doesn't concern you, Garrett. Anything concerning Caleb concerns me. We've been neighbors 20 years. Garrett's eyes were hard, and I seem to recall you and Hendricks running a few good families off their land after the war. Legal paperwork and all. Funny how that paperwork always seemed to benefit Hendricks. That's slanderous talk. Is it, or is it just memory? Another horse appeared on the road, a young rider, barely 17, from the ranch to the south. Then another, an older man Caleb recognized from town. Word had spread somehow, or maybe Garrett had sent word before riding over. Either way, Caleb wasn't alone anymore. Mackie's jaw worked. He glanced at his deputies, then back at Caleb. This isn't over, he said quietly. I expect it's not. Cole Hendricks doesn't forget, and he doesn't forgive. You're making a powerful enemy. He made himself my enemy 8 years ago when he burned out Thomas Farrow. The words hung in the air. Mackie's expression went cold. So you do know who she is? I know her father was a good man murdered for profit. I know Hendricks and his dogs took everything from her. And I know if he wants to come for her again, he'll have to go through me first. Mackie stared at him, then slowly he turned his horse. Your choice, he said, but choices have consequences. The three riders moved back down the valley road, dust rising behind them. Caleb didn't move until they were out of sight. Then he exhaled slowly, hands shaking just slightly. Garrett stepped beside him. That was a hell of a stand. We are not done yet. No, but you bought time. The older man glanced toward the corral. She worth it. Caleb looked at Annie, still standing in the shadows, face pale but eyes burning. Yes, he said, she is. Garrett nodded. Then we'll stand with you, whatever comes next. The other neighbors murmured agreement. Then, one by one, they drifted off, back to their own ranches, their own lives. But the message was clear. Caleb wasn't alone, and neither was Annie. As the sun dipped lower, Caleb walked to the corral. Annie met him halfway, fists clenched. You shouldn't have done that, she said. Probably not. They'll come back. Hendricks won't let this go. I know. You've made yourself a target, for me, for someone you barely know. Caleb looked at her, this fierce, broken young woman who tried to steal his horse and ended up mending his fences instead. Your father showed me kindness once, he said quietly. Figure it's time I returned it. Annie's eyes glistened, but still no tears fell. I don't know if I can stay, she whispered. Then we'll figure it out, together. For the first time since she'd arrived, Annie Farrow let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. The next morning, Caleb woke to the smell of coffee already brewing. He found Annie in the kitchen, frying eggs and bacon. She'd found the good plates, the ones he never used, the ones his mother had left him, and set 2 places at the table. Figured I owed you breakfast, she said without looking up, after yesterday. Caleb poured himself coffee. You don't owe me anything. I owe you plenty, but this is what I can give right now. They ate in companionable silence. The eggs were cooked perfectly, the bacon crisp but not burned. Annie had even made biscuits, light and flaky, better than anything Caleb managed. Where'd you learn to cook like this? He asked. My mother, before she died when I was 10. Annie broke her biscuit open, steam rising. She said a woman should know how to take care of herself and others. Cooking, sewing, shooting, riding. She taught me all of it. Said the world wasn't kind to women who couldn't stand on their own. Sounds like a wise woman. She was, Annie's voice softened. My father, after she died, he tried, but he was better with cattle than kids. My brothers and I raised each other mostly. We were happy enough. Until men decided happiness wasn't something we deserved. Caleb set down his fork. Annie, what Hendrick did. Don't, she cut him off. Don't try to make sense of it. There is no sense. Evil doesn't need a reason. No, but it does need to be stopped. She looked at him then, really looked. You can't stop him. He owns half the county. Sheriff Mackey's in his pocket. The law won't touch him. Then we don't use the law. Meaning what? You shoot him, burn his land office. That makes you just like him. No, it makes me someone who fights back. Annie shook her head. I've been fighting back for 8 years. Running is fighting, surviving is fighting, and I'm tired, Caleb. I'm so damn tired. The rawness in her voice broke something in him. He reached across the table, hesitated, then gently placed his hand over hers. She didn't pull away. Then stop fighting, he said quietly. Let me help carry it for a while. Her breath hitched. Why do you care? Because your father helped me when he didn't have to. Because I'm tired of watching good people get crushed. And because, he paused, because you remind me that there's still something worth protecting in this world. Annie's fingers curled around his, not tight, just holding on. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. How to trust, how to stay. Neither do I, but maybe we figure it out together. They sat like that for a long moment, two broken people holding onto each other in a kitchen that smelled like coffee and hope. So here's the question that changes everything. If you were Caleb, would you risk everything, your land, your safety, your life, for someone you barely knew? Or would you tell Annie to move on before Hendricks came back with more than threats? Take a breath, think about that. And if you're still with me, tap subscribe so you don't miss how this turns out. Tell me in the comments, what would you do? Later that afternoon, Annie found Caleb in the barn, oiling tack. I want to learn to shoot better, she said. He looked up. You said you could already shoot. I can, but not well enough. Not if Hendricks sends men, her jaw set. I won't hide behind you when it happens. Caleb studied her, then he nodded. All right. They spent the next 2 hours in the back pasture, setting up targets, old bottles, tin cans, fence posts. Caleb handed her his spare revolver, a Colt Navy that had belonged to his father. This is heavier than what you're used to, he said, but it's reliable. Annie tested the weight, aimed, fired. The bottle exploded. You said you weren't good, Caleb observed. I'm not, that was luck. Do it again. She did, 5 shots, 4 hits. The misses were close. That's not luck, Caleb said. That's skill. Annie lowered the gun. My father taught me. He said a girl needed to be able to protect herself, so he taught me to shoot before he taught me to sew. Smart man. He was, and they killed him anyway. Caleb reloaded the revolver, handed it back. Then we make sure they don't kill you. They practiced until sundown, firing, reloading, adjusting stance, breathing. By the end, Annie's hands were steady and her aim was true. You'll do, Caleb said. I'll have to. As they walked back to the house, Annie spoke quietly. Caleb, if it comes to a fight. It will. I want you to know I'll stand with you, not behind you, with you. He stopped, looked at her in the fading light. Annie. I'm not asking permission, I'm telling you. This is my fight too, maybe more mine than yours. That's not. It is, her voice was fierce now. Hendricks took my family, took my home, took 8 years of my life. If he wants more, he'll have to go through me first. Caleb saw it then, the woman she'd become beneath the fear and exhaustion. Not broken, not running, standing. All right, he said, we stand together. Together. She held out her hand, he took it, and this time when they shook, it felt like a promise. That night Caleb couldn't sleep. He stood on the porch, watching the stars wheel overhead, and wondered if he was being brave or just foolish. The door creaked. Annie stepped out, wrapped in a blanket. Can't sleep either, she asked. Too much thinking. About. Tomorrow, the day after, how many men Hendricks might send, whether we're strong enough to stand. Annie moved beside him. We are still breathing, that makes us strong enough. You sound certain. I'm not, but I'm done being afraid. She looked up at him. You gave me something I haven't had in 8 years, Caleb. You gave me a reason to stay, a place that feels like it might become home. That's worth fighting for. He met her eyes. In the moonlight, she looked younger, but also fiercer, like a fire that had been banked too long and was finally allowed to burn. Annie. I know this is fast. I know it's probably foolish, but I need to say it. She took a breath. I'm not just staying for the job. I'm staying because of you, because you're the first person in 8 years who looked at me and saw something worth protecting. Caleb's chest tightened. Annie, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. But he did have something to say. Something he'd been feeling since the moment she'd stood in front of him with a pry bar in her hands and defiance in her eyes. When I offered you that job, he said slowly, I told myself it was about your father, about debt and honor and doing the right thing. but that's not why I asked you to stay. Then why? Because I saw something in you that I thought I'd lost. Hope, fight, the belief that maybe tomorrow could be better than yesterday. He turned to face her fully. You asked me once why I cared. The truth is, I don't know when it changed from duty to something else, but it did, and now I can't imagine this ranch without you on it. Annie's breath caught. Caleb. I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. You've got enough weighing on you without me adding more, but I wanted you to know. Whatever happens next, with Hendricks, with the law, with any of it, I'm not standing with you because I have to. I'm standing with you because I want to. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Then Annie stepped forward and rested her head against his chest. Caleb wrapped his arms around her, and they stood there beneath the stars, holding onto something fragile and new. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For giving me a reason to stop running. Caleb closed his eyes. Thank you for giving me a reason to stand. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring, but tonight neither of them was alone. Hendricks came on the 5th day. Not with Sheriff Mackey this time. With 8 men, hired guns, range thugs, the kind who worked for money and asked no questions. They rode up the valley road at noon, sunlight glinting off rifle barrels. Caleb spotted them from the barn. His stomach dropped, but his hands stayed steady. Annie, he called, inside. She appeared from the corral, saw the riders, and her face went pale. But she didn't run. She grabbed the rifle leaning by the door and moved beside him. I told you, she said, together. The riders pulled up in a loose semicircle around the house. Cole Hendricks sat in the center, a tall man, late 50s, dressed in a fine suit like he was attending a business meeting instead of leading an armed mob. His face was clean-shaven and cruel. Caleb Morrow, Hendricks called out, I believe you have something that belongs to me. Nothing here belongs to you, Caleb replied. That girl, Annie Farrow, her father died owing me money. The debt passes to her. I've got legal paperwork saying so. Legal doesn't mean just. It means enforceable, Hendricks smiled. You're a reasonable man, Caleb. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Send her out, and we'll be on our way. No. No, Hendricks' smile faded. You're one man, I've got 8. You really want to die for a girl you've known a month? If that's what it takes. Annie shifted beside him. Caleb, don't. Quiet, he said softly, then louder. You want her, Hendricks, you'll have to go through me. That can be arranged. The hired guns shifted, fingers moving toward triggers. Caleb's hand rested on his revolver. The math was simple and brutal. He might take 2 down, maybe 3, but not 8. It would end badly. Then, behind them, hoofbeats. Not from the road, from the neighboring ranches. Old Garrett appeared first, shotgun across his saddle, face grim. Then the young rider from the South Ranch. Then 3 more, ranchers Caleb knew by name, men he'd worked beside and traded with. They spread out in a loose line behind Caleb and Annie, weapons visible but not drawn. Seems you're not alone, Hendricks, Garrett called out. Hendricks' face darkened. This is a legal matter. It doesn't concern you. It concerns us when you ride onto our neighbor's land with hired killers. I have every right. You have nothing. An older woman rode forward, Martha Dawson, who ran the ranch to the east. She'd buried 2 husbands and raised 5 sons, and her voice could cut steel. We all remember what you did to Thomas Farrow. Legal paperwork, you called it. Murder, we called it. You're not taking his daughter too. Hendricks' jaw clenched. You're interfering with. With what? Your theft? Your lies? Martha's eyes blazed. We've watched you steal land for years, Hendricks, hiding behind sheriffs and judges you've bought. But not today. Today you're outnumbered. More riders appeared, 6, then 8, then a dozen. Word had spread through the valley like wildfire. Ranchers, farmers, townspeople who remembered Thomas Farrow and were tired of watching good people get crushed. Hendricks looked around, seeing his 8 guns surrounded by 20. The math had changed. This isn't over, he snarled. Yes, Caleb said quietly, it is. You came here thinking fear would be enough, but you're the only one afraid now, afraid that if you push this, every person you've wronged will stand up and say enough. I'll have the Lord. The Lord. Garrett spat. Sheriff Mackey's in your pocket, but he's not stupid. He won't ride against half the county. And when word reaches the territorial governor about how you've been running things, those legal papers of yours won't mean a damn thing. Hendrick's face went purple, but he wasn't a fool. He could see the odds. This isn't over, he repeated, but his voice had lost its edge. It is, Caleb said. Ride away, Hendricks, and if you come back, you won't be facing one man, you'll be facing all of us. For a long moment, Hendricks sat frozen. Then slowly he turned his horse. Let's go, he snapped at his men. The hired guns hesitated, looking at the ranchers surrounding them. Then, one by one, they followed Hendricks back down the valley road. No one spoke until the riders were out of sight. Then Martha Dawson laughed, a sharp, fierce sound. Well, that's the most excitement we've had in years. Garrett grinned. Hendricks looked like he'd swallowed a hornet. The tension broke. The ranchers laughed, clapped shoulders, shared brief nods of satisfaction. They'd stood together, and it had been enough. Caleb turned to Annie. She stood frozen, rifle still gripped tight, eyes wide with disbelief. It's over, he said softly. Is it? For now, maybe for good. Hendricks knows he can't touch you without bringing the whole valley down on his head. He'll try another way. Maybe, but we'll be ready. Annie lowered the rifle, her hands shook. Then, suddenly, her knees gave out. Caleb caught her, held her up. She pressed her face into his shoulder, and finally, the tears came. 8 years of running, of fear, of holding herself together by sheer will, it all broke at once. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm sorry, SHH, you're safe, I've got you. The ranchers quietly dispersed, giving them space. Garrett tipped his hat. Martha smiled. They drifted back to their own lands, their own lives, leaving Caleb and Annie standing in the yard. When the tears finally subsided, Annie pulled back. Her face was blotchy, her eyes red, but something had changed. The hardness was gone, the constant vigilance. For the first time, she looked her actual age, young, vulnerable, human. Thank you, she whispered. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do, for standing, for fighting, for giving me a reason to believe I could have a life again. Caleb brushed a strand of hair from her face. What kind of life do you want, Annie? She looked at him, this man who'd caught her red-handed trying to steal his horse and had offered her a job instead, who'd stood between her and an armed mob, who'd given her the first real home she'd had in 8 years. This one, she said, here with you, if you'll have me. Not just as a ranch hand. Not just as a ranch hand. Caleb smiled, the first real smile he'd felt in years. Then stay, not for a month or a season, stay for good. Are you asking? I'm asking if you'll build a life here, with me, not out of debt or duty, but because you want to. Annie's breath caught. Caleb. You said you wanted a job or a life. I'm offering both. Work beside me, stand beside me, not because you owe me, because you choose to. For a moment, she just stared at him. Then, slowly, a smile broke across her face, fragile but real. Yes, she said, I choose yes. Caleb pulled her close and kissed her, gentle, careful, full of promise. When they finally broke apart, the sun was setting, painting the valley gold and orange. We've got work to do, Caleb said. Fence needs mending, that mare still needs breaking, and I'm terrible at cooking. Annie laughed, a real laugh, bright and unguarded. Good thing I'm not. They walked back to the house together, side by side, as the last light faded from the sky. Epilogue. 2 years later, on a warm spring morning, Caleb and Annie stood on the porch of their rebuilt ranch house, bigger now, with room for the family they hoped to start. The valley had changed. Hendricks had left Benton Creek after an investigation into his land dealings. Sheriff Mackey had been replaced. The ranchers who'd stood together that day had formed a cooperative, watching out for each other, ensuring that what happened to Thomas Farrow never happened again. Annie still woke sometimes with nightmares, still flinched at unexpected sounds. Healing took time, but she had time now. She had a home. She had a partner who stood beside her, not just when danger came, but in the quiet moments between. She tended a garden behind the house, vegetables and flowers growing side by side. She'd planted 2 small trees near the fence line, one for her father, one for her brothers, not grave, memorials, places to remember without drowning in grief. Caleb watched her work, mending a saddle on the porch. Sometimes he still thought about that afternoon when he'd found a desperate young woman tearing down his fence. How easily he could have turned her away. How different everything would be if he had. "What are you thinking?" Annie called from the garden. "That I'm glad you're a terrible horse thief." She laughed. "I could have done it if you hadn't caught me. Maybe, but then I'd have lost my best ranch hand." "Just your ranch hand. And my wife, and my partner, and the best thing that ever happened to me." Annie set down her trowel and walked over, dirt on her hands, sun in her hair. She kissed him softly. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." They stood there on the porch, watching the valley stretch out before them, green and alive and full of possibility. Annie Farrow had stopped running, and Caleb Morrow had found someone worth standing for. Together, they'd built something neither of them had expected, a home. Not just a place, but a promise. That some things were worth fighting for, that kindness could defeat cruelty, that even broken people could find their way to whole. The wind stirred the grass. The cattle lowed softly in the distance, and in the warmth of the afternoon sun, 2 people who'd found each other in the midst of chaos stood side by side, facing whatever came next. Together.